I'm Eva, and I would like to welcome you to another episode of The Charm of It, a podcast for homebodies who share my fondness for knitting, reading, and playing board games. If you're a new viewer, I'm so glad you found your way to my little corner of the internet, and if you're a returning viewer, it's wonderful to see you again. Thank you so much to everyone for leaving such supportive, reassuring, exciting comments on my last episode. I must admit I was quite nervous to put that out there because the more casual style feels a little more vulnerable, and it had just been so long since I podcasted, and then I wasn't sure if people would like me mixing all these different topics together. So it means the world to me that so many of you took the time to reassure and encourage me. I'm really grateful for it, so thank you. I am definitely going to pursue figuring out the technology to do a live episode. I was thinking around 1 p.m. Eastern Time might work best because then it's 10 a.m. over on the Pacific Coast and just after dinner time in Europe, at least Western Europe. But do let me know if a different time would work best for you and if you have a weekend versus weekday preference. However, of course, I will save and upload any videos that come out of live sessions, and you can always leave questions in the comments, and I can just answer them on air. So if live sessions don't work for you for whatever reason, you're not going to miss out on any content, I promise. I just think that would be a fun way to do more question and answer type episodes around specific things. So, yeah. I think that that's all the technical podcasty kind of stuff that I should talk about. So let's go ahead and talk about what I will be knitting while chatting with you today. And I am working on a sweater for myself as well as a sweater for Joel. And this is the second sleeve for that sweater. So let me get to the end of this round. But it is knit out of hawthorn yarn, which is a Knit Picks fingering weight yarn. It's a heavier fingering weight though. I remember it's less than 400 yards to 100 grams, but I don't remember exactly how much less. So I'm knitting it at a sport weight gauge so that it's a little drapier. And that is around 6 stitches to the inch, I believe, on US size 3s. And when I use this yarn to knit socks, then I'm on US 0s to get more like 8 to 9 stitches to the inch. It is a very cloudy, rainy day today. So I don't think my colors are going to be accurate, but that's okay because this is a casual podcast now. Also I should apologize for my wet hair. I took Nessie for a walk right before recording this, and she does not mind at all walking in the rain. So we went for quite a long walk, and we both got quite damp, but we really enjoyed getting out in fresh air. No one else was around, and the lake looks beautiful, as always. But that is why my hair is very wet. I didn't want to wait for it to dry before recording. Back to the sweater. So I'm calling this my Lichen Fanciers cardigan. I've always loved moss and lichen. When I was a kid, I even had a pet moss for a while before we moved to England, and the Columbian Exchange does not let you bring random plants. Anyway, and so I love that Katie of the Green Bean podcast has started this Lichen Fanciers hashtag, and I mean, I love everything about her content, but that one in particular makes me happy, and this colorway very much reminds me of lichen and how it's almost shockingly bright, especially in winter and spring's woods, early spring, where everything is still kind of brown and a little bit faded, and then the lichen is just almost electric. And this is a little bit brighter than I would normally wear, but it happens to match my eyes quite well. So I think that it'll still be okay. Like I said, the colors in this episode are not going to be the best. So you'll have to take my word for it, I suppose. And it's a mainly stockinette sweater. I've designed it myself. But I did go ahead and add lace panels up the front, and I found them in the Japanese Stitch Knitting Dictionary, which I love. And it's this very pretty lace pattern with a little bit of cables, and it reminds me once again of lichen because it's very ruffly, and it's a little bit, I don't know, it's got little waves and stuff. I'm sure that you'll see the finished cardigan soon since I've already knit the body. So once I finish this sleeve, all I have to do is seam it up. Actually, all I have to do is shoulder and sleeve seams this time because I knit the body in one piece, and do the bands. So, and it's definitely getting to be sweater weather without a jacket weather, which is one of my favorites, that kind of transitional weather. So it'll be nice to have a new sweater to wear. I have been kind of alternating between 3/4 sleeves and full-length sleeves for the sweaters that I've been knitting. I find that they both get use in my wardrobe, but for different reasons, and depending on what time of year it is. Like when I can just wear a sweater without a coat, then I like the long sleeves so that I can pull them down if it's cooler out, whereas when I'm mainly wearing my sweaters inside and then put big heavy winter coats on over them, then 3/4 sleeves is nicer because it helps me not overheat. I run warm to begin with, and then I use heating pads to help all of my pain issues. So overheating is a constant struggle as a knitter who loves wool. But because this yarn is superwash and because I'm knitting it at a fairly loose gauge, I thought that full-length sleeves would be okay, and I did have the yardage for it. Sometimes I don't have the yardage to get away with full-length sleeves, and so yeah. And I've also realized since I began knitting that if I'm going to do full-length sleeves, I like them to actually go to about here on me. And I think that's because I am a fairly short person, and I especially have very short limbs. So all of my store-bought tops, the sleeves are longer than my wrist, like, and so that just feels normal to me. And when I first started knitting, I knit long sleeve cardigans that ended at my actual wrist, and it doesn't feel right. It feels skimpy. So now I knit them longer. I knit an 18-inch sleeve, and that puts it there. So yeah, it feels really nice to be knitting sweaters again. I had kind of gotten out of the habit for a while, and I really enjoy the process of knitting garments and designing garments. I was interested in clothes before I became a knitter, and so it's just something about knitting that has always very much appealed to me. And I have noticed that I haven't been wearing my sweaters as much this past winter, and I think I'm not really sure why, so I'm going to pay attention to that again next year and then decide going forward whether I should spend more of my energy and yarn on sweaters, or if maybe cowls and shawls make more sense with the changes in my lifestyle. But I really think that I can incorporate my sweaters back into my wardrobe, because for a while I was wearing one almost every day, so I think it's just a question of habit. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, because I'm hoping that some of you will have advice, is alternating skeins. As you can see, this is a variegated yarn, and I apologize, I don't know the colorway, but it's also discontinued, so you wouldn't be able to buy it right now anyway. So when I knit flat pieces and I alternate skeins, I know to pick up the yarn in the way so that it doesn't twist, right? But I started doing that on the first sleeve, and I was getting a gap along the fabric. So instead, the only way I know of to get rid of the gap is to pick up the yarn in the way that twists them. And that means that there's twists traveling down my yarn. And so every, I'd say 4 rounds or so, in the best circumstances, I have to stop and untwist my yarn, which is very fiddly. And it seems like there must be a better way. I have not used a lot of variegated yarns. I tend more towards solids and heathers. So I'm not very familiar with having to alternate skeins. I haven't knit with a lot of hand-dyed yarn either. So if any of you are and have tips for alternating skeins while knitting in the round, please share them. Because I love sleeve knitting. I find it very relaxing, especially most of the sleeves I knit for my sweaters are plain stockinette, and so I can just knit while reading and be perfectly happy. But with this one, first, just having to drop and pick up yarn every 2 rounds is not my favorite. I don't like any knitting. Like, I prefer knitting where I don't have to do that, I should say. Like, I prefer Fair Isle to Intarsia, that kind of thing. But then also see how the yarn is starting to snarl, that situation happening, it just feels like there must be a more comfortable, relaxing way to handle this. So feel free to chime in. I would love to hear your advice. But that issue aside, I'm very much enjoying this project. The little lace panels running up the front were really fun to do, and I'm really looking forward to having another finished sweater to wear. I finished a sweater for myself a couple weeks ago as well, so I'll have to go ahead and wear that maybe next time I'm podcasting and talk about it. I was actually thinking that would be a good topic for the first live session, so we shall see. And yeah, let me just make sure. The only challenge with doing sleeve knitting while podcasting is that I'm going to have to remember to do my increases every 8th round. So I think that is everything I need to say about this project. Oh, while I'm in the knitting section, I should also mention I am wearing mitts from the Hedge Nettle pattern by Kyla of Arctos Knits, and a cowl. It's the Star Shower cowl, which is a fingering weight pattern, so I just adapted it for worsted weight. I think I just stopped a chart earlier, or a repeat earlier. I can't remember. And they're both out of Malabrigo. Whichever one the worsted weight plied yarn is, not the single ply. That was a really generous gift from Lily, and it's this really pretty mauve color in real life called Sandbank, and I also have a really giant shawl knit out of it that I love to snuggle up in. And yeah, so I am so grateful, Lily, that you gave me the beautiful yarn, and I really love these mitts. They were a really quick, easy project. Of course, I love leaves, and they're a little bit shorter than usually I knit myself fingerless mitts that go up to here, but these are perfect for wearing while knitting. So my other pairs I end up having to fold back if I want to wear them while knitting. Although, to be honest, I don't usually wear mitts inside. They're usually more of a outside accessory for me when it's a little too warm for mittens. But how do you wear your fingerless mitts? I recently knit a pair for Joel, actually, because his office is our attic. We converted it last year so that he would have his own space. And it turned out beautifully. It looks great up there. He and his family did an incredible job. But it's not connected to our central heating, so it can get quite chilly in the winters. And since he's working from home so much, I noticed when he would come downstairs, his hands were really cold. So I knit him a pair of fingerless mitts as well out of the same yarn in a different colorway that Lily also gave me, a really beautiful teal that I had also used to knit a scarf for him. And he wears his mitts all the time. So I can see how they really are functional. I think so I'm not sure why I don't wear mine more indoors. I think because a lot of times I've just got a hand knit sweater on or something. So also, I use heating pads to treat my pains, so that makes me less prone to chilliness because I've usually got at least one heating pad cranked up to 167 degrees Fahrenheit or 75 Celsius. All the heating pads convert, so it's easy to know. On me, right now it's on my hips, so that probably means that I don't need to warm up as much as most people. But yeah, maybe I just need to figure out a new place to store my mitts so that they're easily to hand when my hands are cold. I am very rambling today, which I guess isn't unusual. But let's move on to the reading section of the podcast. I finished a book last night, actually. I didn't do a lot of reading in the last week because it was Joel's birthday week, and he really wanted to do a movie marathon of the extended Lord of the Rings. And I was also attending an online summit called Explore More, which involved watching videos every day. So I had less time for reading than I usually do. But as I was saying, I finished a book last night, and it's called The 100-Year House by Rebecca Makkai, Makkai. I'm not actually sure how you pronounce that. And I'm honestly not sure how I feel about it. So it was definitely a very readable book. In addition to all the movie and summit watching I've been doing, I was also just in a bit of a reading slump. I wasn't really feeling drawn to pick up. I had finished the romance I talked about last time, and I started another book, and just really wasn't feeling drawn to it. So I ended up just abandoning it once I realized that if I'm not motivated to pick up my e-reader, then I should probably just switch to a new book. So I started this one a couple days ago, and then I stayed up late last night to finish it. So it definitely got me out of my reading slump. And by the end of it, I was very invested in it, and I wanted to know what was going to happen. And I found the ending very satisfying. But especially the first third of it, I found it a little difficult to connect to the characters. So basically, it's a story of people who lived in a big, rambling old house that's built above Chicago, and it's 100 years old. So they started construction in 1900. So the story opens in 1999, and that's the first third of the novel. And then it goes back in time to the 1950s, and that's the second third. Then the 1920s. And then there's a little epilogue that's called a prologue, with just a few pages about when the house was originally built. And I liked that structure. I thought it was interesting. I liked that she did a really good job of showing you the same objects and aspects of the house in different times, and so you kind of learned more about the story behind the objects than any of the characters would have known. And this house alternating between being a private residence for a wealthy family and being an artist colony. So it had interesting stories in that sense. But some of the characters, they were very different from me. And I didn't always understand their decision making, and they weren't terribly likable. Moth is trying to get in. Moth is my cat, in case you're a new viewer. I closed the door to record the podcast episode. Hi, Thistle. And here's Thistle, my older puppy. Nessie is napping downstairs, so she will not make an appearance. But as I was saying, the characters were not always particularly likable. And honestly, usually falling in love with characters is what makes me fall in love with a book. So I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this book, despite the characters. But I don't think I would run out to read more books by her, if that makes sense. Because even though it was good, it didn't touch my heart. And that's okay, not every book. Hello, Moth. I remember there were a lot of comments saying you guys want to see the pets again, so clearly they're obliging you. Anyway, as I was saying, not every book has to be a heart book. But yeah, it was a well-written, engaging novel, and I know that one of her other books, The Borrower, is very popular amongst a lot of my book blogging friends. So maybe I'll read that one, but let's just say that after finishing The 100-Year House, I didn't run to the library website and see if I could borrow any other books by her, if that makes sense. So the new book that I started is called Speaking of Summer by Kalisha Buckhanon. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name either. And I must have put it on hold at some point because I got to the top of the holds list for the ebook, but I don't remember why, so I'm guessing someone who I follow on Instagram posted about it. That's where I get most of my book recommendations this day. these days. And so far, once again, I think it's a really good book. I'm not instantly drawn in by it, I think because the subject matter is sad and stressful. So it's about a woman whose twin sister has gone missing in New York City, and basically no one's doing anything about it. And so she's trying to figure out what happened to her sister herself. And it's written from the remaining sister's point of view. Her name is Autumn. And it's got a little bit of unreliable narrator going on. Perhaps not really unreliable so much as just kind of fragmented. This is a woman who is in a really untenable situation, not knowing where your sister is. And so her narrative voice reflects that. So it is a little bit of a challenge for me to read in that sense, just because it's certainly not cozy reading. But I do think it's really strong, and I certainly think I'm going to keep reading it. I think it's well written, and I'm interested to see where it's going to go. I am only, I think, 16% into it. So funny how e-readers track your progress so much more precisely than just reading a paper book. So yeah, I'm not really sure how it's going to unfold. I'm not sure if she's going to find her sister, or if it's going to be more about her getting to a place where she's okay again in life, or what's going to happen. But I did notice that Tayari Jones had praise for it on the cover. She did the cover blurb, and I love Tayari Jones. Every novel of hers that I've read has just been so moving and impactful. And I think I've read all 3 of hers. She's written 3 or 4. So that's another reason why I definitely want to stick with this and give it some time to really win me over. Sorry that I'm being so lukewarm about books. I hope I'm not giving a bad impression. Like I said, I think these are both really good books, and just because I'm not gushing the way I do when it's an author who I have fallen in love with entirely doesn't mean that they're not books that you should be reading. So finally, let us move on to talking a little bit about board games. And I know that last week I did more of a review type thing, but I don't think that I want to do that. I think I want it to be more of a little journal of what I've been playing and what Joel and I have been playing, and hopefully if social distancing, like when social distancing ends, what I've been playing with friends. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and do it that way instead of only talking about one game. And speaking of friends, I did actually attend a virtual board game night last Friday via Zoom and Tabletop Simulator, which my friends Lucy and Ian were kind enough to give me for my birthday, and then they hosted this big gathering, and they did so much work to make it all run smoothly. So there were 10 of us, and we ended up playing Camel Up, which is a game that I had played in person once before. Sorry, I gotta see if I'm at the 8th round. Starting 7. Anyway, I played it in person once before, so I was glad that I knew the rules a little bit before playing it virtually. But it's a game where camels are racing around a board and people are making bets on the camels. So it's lighthearted and fun and good for big groups. And it was a really enjoyable experience. We were playing at the full player count, and between trying to figure out Tabletop Simulator mechanics and people not always realizing if it was their turn, because I think that's a little harder to tell virtually, and then just chit-chatting, it definitely took 3 hours for us to play. But I don't think that that's typical for the game. I think that that's just, because this was the first time that we had all done a virtual board game night. But the good thing is that we all enjoyed it, and I got a lot of knitting done on Joel's sweater in between my turns. So it was really fun. And I actually decided to go ahead and get that game for my mom for Mother's Day, because she and my sister and niece and brother-in-law and my dad have all been playing more games, and I think that that's one that they would really enjoy. And I might be able to play it with them virtually via FaceTime. There's only one secret thing that you do in the game, so other than that, they could just move for me. Let's see, so that was really enjoyable. Gotta pull out my phone to see what else we played. I am a member of Board Game Geek, and I have all of Joel's and all of our games are on Board Game Geek, and then I track our plays because I'm a nerd. I don't always track our plays, but I usually do. And so I'm just gonna bring that up so that I can see what we played this week. Okay, so we actually played quite a few cooperative games, which is good because someone had a question about that. I apologize for not remembering your name, but I do remember that you wanted me to talk about cooperative games. And I have actually done a couple reviews of cooperatives for my channel because I had started doing board game reviews. So Forbidden Island and Pandemic Iberia, both of those videos. Those are, I think, two of the games that I would happily recommend to new board gamers who are looking to try out some cooperative ones. Forbidden Island is much simpler, so even if you're completely new to board games, that would be a good one. Pandemic Iberia is a good one if you're already familiar with board games or you just don't mind having a more complex learning curve. And yeah, those are two. I love playing cooperative games with Joel. I guess I should have prefaced that. I think it's really nice to be on the same team and to win or lose together and to be able to discuss strategy, although I do that a lot in our competitive games too. A lot of our competitive games are what's thought of as multiplayer solitaire, in that each player is trying to do the best strategy they can and get the most amount of points to win, but there's not direct interference with each other. And so in any of those types of games, I'll tell Joel at the beginning what kind of strategy I'm going to try out so that I can see how it works, and then I usually comment on it as we're playing the game. So cooperative games are right up my alley, and especially since most of the games we play are two-player and we're mainly playing with each other, sometimes one of us will get on a winning streak, which can be a bit disheartening for the other one. And so it's nice to be able to take a little bit of a break from the competitive games and really dive into co-ops. I think the reason why we play competitive as well as co-op games is that there's just so many more game mechanics, and there's a much broader variety of things to do while playing board games amongst competitive board games and cooperative. And I'm not sure if that's a function of having to make a game cooperative requires certain mechanics, or if it's just because cooperative games are fairly new as an idea, and so designers aren't as sure how to make them with more varied mechanics. Does that make sense? So basically, I'm not sure if the way that we see a lot of repeated mechanics is necessary or just a function that it's a new industry. And it feels like cooperative games are expanding, so I think that designers are getting more creative with them. So we'll see, because I would love to have a wider variety of mechanics in cooperative games. Oh, that's another. So April is both my birthday month and Joel's birthday month, so we got quite a few new games. And they were all cooperative. And if you've already played the pandemic type games and you're looking for a different style cooperative, Atlantis Rising is a really fun worker placement co-op game. It probably has too steep of a learning curve if you've never played games before, but it looks more intimidating than it is. So once we got into playing it, it was pretty straightforward, and we both really enjoyed that. And it does follow the typical cooperative style of a player takes a turn and then the game takes a turn. But that's typical in all cooperatives where you're going to talk about strategy. There are other cooperatives where you can't talk about strategy and you're not sharing like what cards you have in your hand. You have to keep that secret, so those play differently as well. And I enjoy those. They remind me of playing partnered card games like Pinochle and Hearts and Euchre. But I think if you're looking to get a cooperative game to play with your loved one, then you probably want to do one of the ones where you get to talk about your strategy and that kind of thing. I just noticed the time, and it is actually time for Nessie's nap time to be over, even though I haven't talked about all the board games that we played over the last week. So I will try to record earlier next week, and still figuring this out. But let's see. Yeah, I just don't think that... I'll talk about one. So we played Quirky Circuits, which is another one of our new ones. And that is a cooperative that uses hidden information. So we each have a hand of cards, but we can't tell the other what it is. And it's actually a robot programming game. It's got a really cute theme. There are 4 different robots. One is a cat that sits on a Roomba. One is a robot puppy that like retrieves dinosaur fossil bones. One is a sushi chef robot who needs to feed cats. And one is a bee. And I'm not sure what she does. I think she's moving stuff around in the garden. Anyway, so I love those kind of like cute, lighthearted themes. And it's a programming game, so you're trying to program the robots to achieve various tasks, and you have to play the cards face down. So the only thing you know from the backs of the cards is whether the other players have played a movement card or a turning card. And other than that, you're just kind of trying to read what the other person is doing. And one of the neat things about it is that rather than coming with one board game, it comes with a spiral book that has 24 different pages of scenarios. And so it starts out very simple, and then as you get more familiar with the mechanics, you can do the more complicated scenarios. Or if you just want to play a quick and easy game, you can just play one of the simpler scenarios again. So since Joel and I both wanted to have a little more variety in our cooperative games, I got that one for him for his birthday, and we played out the first scenario, and it was really fun. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how the robots progress and how things get more challenging. I know that there are different cards to add and that kind of thing. But one of the things that I really appreciate is when any game has built-in levels of difficulty, but especially cooperative games have built-in so that you can start fairly simple, since obviously the more difficult a cooperative game can be, the more longevity it has. But you don't necessarily want to be destroyed in your first game when you're still trying to figure things out. So I really like having adjustable or variable difficulty levels. And I also really like it when there are included in the regular board game box, there's almost like expansions and different ways to play the same game and new material to discover and that kind of thing. I think it helps make the game stay fresh. So yeah, that was a really fun one that we played this past weekend. And with that, I will say goodbye. Thank you so much for tuning in. It was really wonderful to spend some time with you, heating, padding, and knitting, and I hope that wherever you are, you also enjoyed a little bit of crafting time, or just, I don't know, maybe you were listening while doing chores. But I would love to hear what you are crafting or reading or playing yourself. I really want this to become a more community-oriented channel, so I'm working hard on replying to comments and all that kind of thing. I am on Instagram. My account is private now. It didn't used to be, but I was getting a lot of weird followers. So I did go ahead and make it private. And so when you make a request, if you also have a private account, and so I can't see, and I can't tell from like your name or your profile picture that you're a crafter or something, then I'm probably not going to accept you. So if you do have a private Instagram account and you want to follow me, just message me. I think that's allowed. And that way I know that you found me from the podcast, and then I'm happy to approve the follow. So sorry about that two-step process, but that is where you can keep in touch and see what I'm up to during the week. I mainly post in stories. I don't post a lot on my grid anymore. I'm not sure why. I don't know. But yeah, that is the other place you can find me on the internet, and I'm the charm of it there. I'm also on Ravelry and Board Game Geek. I don't use those for the community functions very much, but that's where you can see board games and knitting projects. I'm not actually on any of the book reading logging sites like Goodreads or Library Thing or anything. So maybe I'll have to start one of those as well, since I'm going to be podcasting about all three things. And yeah, thank you so much for viewing. If you have any viewing and watching, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And I hope that I answered your question about cooperative games. If you would like more specific recommendations, feel free to tell me like what player count and what time length you're looking for, difficulty level, all that kind of thing. And I'm more than happy to provide personalized suggestions. I'm happy to do that for reading too. I love recommending books to other people. So if you ever want me to recommend one to you, just leave a comment telling me 3 of your favorite books, and I will do my best. Obviously, if I haven't read your favorite books, then that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but I think that would be a fun little addition to the podcast. And yeah, I've made quite a bit of progress on my sleeve. I will have Thistle make another candle. Hello, Thistle. So, Thistle and I both wish you a lovely weekend and look forward to seeing you next week. Bye!